Apologies.
Today, President Trump unveiled his budget proposal for fiscal 2021. For the third year in a row, the president's budget puts a magnifying glass on the endemic, pervasive hypocrisy of this administration. He says one thing in his State of the Union and does the opposite in his budget. But the budget is what he does. The State of the Union is just what he says. So 1 week removed from his State of the Union address, President Trump's budget double-crosses American workers and middle-class families he promised to help in that speech. Let's take health care. Candidate Trump promised to protect the social safety net, programs like Medicare and Medicaid, unlike other Republicans. But once in office, President Trump has proposed cutting Medicare and Medicaid every year he sent us a budget. Once again, the president proposed steep cuts to Medicaid, as well as onerous new qualification requirements, policies that would take coverage away from millions. Medicaid affects poor people, but it affects a whole lot of middle-class people whose parents are in nursing homes and nursing facilities and healthcare facilities. Cuts, dramatic cuts to Medicaid, hurt large numbers of Americans, both poor and middle class. On top of that, the budget proposes cutting funding for the Department of Health and Human Services by 9%. That's the department in charge of the coronavirus. He's cutting the budget. Then he'll find when something bad happens, he'll blame somebody else. That's his MO. The president stood in front of the nation and promised his administration would protect Americans with pre-existing conditions. It was a lie when he said it, and his budget makes that very clear. If the president's budget became reality, hundreds of billions of dollars would be taken away from health care services, and tens of millions of Americans would see their coverage disappear, including millions with pre-existing conditions. There is one term that appears nowhere in the president's budget. It's called climate change, one of the greatest challenges of our time, the #1 threat facing our planet. Climate change is not mentioned once among the hundreds of the pages of the president's budget, except it does propose cutting the Environmental Protection Agency by 26%, more than a quarter. The Earth is on fire. Antarctica had a 64-degree record temperature this week. And what's the president's response? He douses the fire with a lighter fluid of weakened pollution regulations and then proposes cutting the fire department. He cares about the oil companies. Lots of those big oil wildcatters send him tons of money. He doesn't care about the future of this globe, and we're leaving something awful to our children and grandchildren. Going further, in the president's budget, hundreds of billions would be slashed from federal housing assistance, student loan forgiveness, federal disability insurance, nutrition assistance to hungry families. Long on the president's chopping block would see another round of severe cuts. Food for children, they're poor. Take it away. Is that what this country stands for? Is that what our Judeo-Christian tradition stands for? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If you're an American struggling with student loan debt or health problems or housing costs or hunger, the president's budget says you're out of luck. Meanwhile, if you're a millionaire or a billionaire or a corporation or a big oil wildcatter, the president's budget says you're in luck. And when it comes to taxes, the president thinks the tax cuts should be extended for an additional 10 years. So much for this deficit reduction that Republican Party used to stand for. Now it's clear, a few years after the tax cut, 2 years after them, the deficit's increasing. It hasn't produced that dramatic increase in revenues that everyone talked about. But let's do it for 10 years. No Republican should complain to Democrats about deficit reduction when we're talking about things that matter to average middle-class people like Medicare and Medicaid when the tax cuts are proposed for 10 years. So the budget reveals once again where President Trump's priorities truly lie. Not with the working Americans he touts in his speeches, but with the ultra-rich, the corporate elites he rewards with his policies. It can't be discarded soon enough. And one more point. I said it the night of the President's State of the Union. I said the truth serum will be his budget. Let's see if the president for once is telling a little bit of the truth. The budget shows all the rhetoric is one way and the actual budget is another. How long will the American people stand for this man's hypocrisy? Blatant, Never seen it in a president, Democrat or Republican, before. Now on whistleblowers. In the aftermath of the president's impeachment trial, the president has begun dismissing members of the administration who testified in Congress, including Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, Ambassador Sondland. The president also dismissed Lieutenant Colonel Eugene Vindman. This was vindictive, nasty, typical of President Trump, for no other reason than he was the brother of LTC Alexander Vindman. This morning, senior advisor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, said these were likely not the last of the firings. This is a textbook case of witness retaliation. Not only is it the retaliation against Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, the anonymous whistleblower, and others like them, it's shameful, it is also illegal. It is illegal. All federal employees have the right, the legal right, to make protected disclosures to Congress and to inspectors general, anonymously and free from reprisals. Even the founding fathers were concerned about whistleblowers and protecting them. This country is being turned inside out, and too many people are going along. If something's going on wrong in government, don't we want to encourage government employees to bring that forward? Don't we? Well, not President Trump, because he is the government. And what's good for him, or what he thinks is good for him, he thinks is good for America, even when they diverge. So, the rights of whistleblowers are being challenged like never before, creating a chilling effect among those who in previous administrations might have come forward to expose abuses of power, waste, and fraud. Whistleblowers save the taxpayer money. Again, it used to be bipartisan. The senator from Iowa has always been defending whistleblowers, but all that goes away now that Trump is president. Without the courage of whistleblowers and the role of inspectors general, the American people would never have known how the president abused his power in Ukraine. Now the president's taking steps to punish anyone who came forward out of spite and out of a desire to prevent future whistleblowers from potentially reporting on the president's misconduct. Make no mistake about it. The president's conducting a deliberate campaign to intimidate anyone who might blow the whistle on his conduct or the conduct of those under his direction. He feels this cannot be tolerated. So today I sent a letter to all 74 inspectors general in the executive branch requesting that they immediately investigate any and all instances of retaliation against anyone who has made or in the future makes protected disclosures of presidential misconduct to Congress or to an inspector general. Members of the administration take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution. Some of them bravely step forward to tell the truth about the president's efforts to solicit foreign interference in the 2020 elections. And for that, for telling the truth under oath, which the president didn't allow his allies to do, for these people doing their patriotic duty to their country, they're being summarily dismissed from their jobs by a vindictive president. Our founders believed the truth was fundamental to good government, and indeed the survival of the republic. As the president takes steps to punish anyone in his administration who tells the truth, it's incumbent on the independent watchdogs in our government to protect whistleblowers like Lieutenant Colonel Vindman and others who put their lives and livelihoods on the line to protect our freedoms. And I was glad to hear the Chief of Staff say that Vindman within the military was protected. At least there's some honor left in this government. Now, about the nomination of Mr. Brasher. Now that the impeachment trial of the president is over, Leader McConnell is wasting no time getting us back to what is his primary goal, rubber stamping unqualified and extreme judicial nominations. This week, the Senate will consider the nomination of Andrew Brasher to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. Mr. Brasher's primary qualification to sit on the federal bench seems to be the 6.5 months he spent on the district court in Alabama. Let me repeat that. Senate Republicans installed Brasher as district court judge less than 7 months before moving to elevate him to an appellate court. Never heard of anything like this. The Senate majority is asking us to promote a candidate for circuit court judgeship who has less than a year of experience as a judge, but he's not just unqualified. Maybe why they're promoting him so quickly is because they love the fact that his views are so wildly out of the mainstream. As Alabama's Solicitor General, Brasher fought against women's reproductive rights, that 3/4 of Americans believe in, common sense gun safety laws, which 90% of Americans believe in, and marriage equality, which a majority of Americans believe in. And he employed far-fetched legal theories that were overruled by the courts, including Justice Scalia. Mr. Brasher shamefully spent his career defending voter suppression efforts. So, less than 1 week after covering up the president's attempt to cheat in the next election, Senate Republicans are moving forward to reward a nominee who supports voter suppression. Both actions smack of contempt for the democratic process and a blatant disregard for the franchise of American citizens, the thing our young men and women have died for throughout the centuries, the right to vote. Mr. Brasher's nomination to the Circuit Court is another disgrace, an absolute disgrace to our federal judiciary. Every senator should vote against it. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.